Thank you so much for tuning in to what has become an annual celebration of Poetry Daily, sponsored by Fall for the Book. We're really sorry not to be together in person, of course, but grateful for the opportunity to reach listeners far and wide. So welcome. Thank you specifically to Kara Oakleaf and Susie Rigdon for all the work they've done to make this reading and all these readings possible. My name is Sally Keith, and in rotation with my friend and colleague Peter Streckfus, I'm currently the editorial director of Poetry Daily. Poetry Daily's mission, as most of you know, is, and always has been, to republish one poem a day in order to provide readers with a window on a very broad range of poetry published today. We hope to make it easier for people like you to find poets and poetry you like, and to help publishers bring news of their books, magazines, and journals to more readers. Before beginning, I'd like to say a brief bit about Poetry Daily's history. Poetry Daily was founded in 1997 by the much beloved Don Selby and Diane Bowler in Charlottesville, Virginia. 2 years ago, and after more than 20 years, Don and Diane decided to transition their project to George Mason University, where, still an independent nonprofit, it is housed today. As Peter and I thought about this transition and what it would be like to do editorial work in conjunction with teaching and writing, it was Peter who wisely imagined creating a larger editorial board. 16 critically acclaimed poets, 4 of whom we feature tonight, from across the United States. It is with this board that we share the work of reading and then selecting daily poems, helping to ensure not only a diversity of poets, but also of aesthetics. A large component of Don and Diane's generous decision to relocate Poetry Daily had to do with creating educational opportunity for students, particularly MFA students at George Mason. Part of my real pleasure this evening is sharing the time with our very excellent editorial team, 2 of whom, Martin Mitchell and Danielle Williams, are graduate assistants, and 2 of whom, Lloyd Wallace and Leslie Smith, very generously donate their time. The work of Poetry Daily would be utterly impossible without them. Because graduate assistantships are only around for a maximum of 3 years, sadly, we are always happy to receive recommendations and to answer questions with regard to working for Poetry Daily while studying poetry at George Mason or simply as a volunteer. Before handing it over, I'd like to mention our upcoming essay series, which will open on October 26th, called What Translation Sparks, in which 16 talented poet translators will offer their perspective on how the art of translation has affected their own writing practice. In tandem with the essay series, and for the first time, Poetry Daily will join the Alan Chuse International Writers Center for one virtual event per month. During these events, 4 panelist poets will join in a moderated conversation sparked by the essays and poems they will have published on Poetry Daily. The first event will be November 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, featuring Kazim Ali, Dan Beachy-Quick, Forrest Gander, and Jennifer Grote. We'll post details on the website and on our daily newsletter. Thank you so much for your attention, for your support, especially through the last few months. We are grateful to all of our readers and to you for listening tonight. I'm going to now pass the microphone to Martin Mitchell, who will introduce Sandra Lynn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Mitchell. I'm the production coordinator for Poetry Daily, as well as a member of its social media team. Our first reader, Sandra Lynn, is the author of 2 poetry collections, Loveliest Grotesque and The Wilderness, which won the 2013 Barnard Woman Poets Prize. Her work has appeared in the New Republic, Jubilat, the New York Times, Poetry, the Yale Review, and elsewhere. Her honors include a 2020 Literature Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Levis Reading Prize, and grants from MacDowell, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Getty Foundation. Born in Seoul, Korea, she is an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Lowell and lives in Cambridge. Her work is characterized by its search for meaning via the non-corporeal, the abstract, and the divine. She seeks to express the ineffable, to render it on the page, while also acknowledging the impossibility of that task in poetry, being that poetry is made up of words, lines, syntax, the effable material of language. Louise Glitz said of Lim's second collection, in its stern and quiet way, The Wilderness is one of the most thrilling books of poetry I have read in many years. Everyone, please welcome Sandra Lynn.
Thank you so much, Martin, and thank you, Poetry Daily, for having me. I'm going to read a few poems from The Wilderness and then a few new poems. This first poem is called Amarfati. Inside every world, there is another world trying to get out, and there is something in you that would like to discount this world. The stars could rise in darkness over heartbreaking coasts, and you would not know if you were ruining your life or beginning a real one. You could claim professional fondness for the world around you. The pictures would dissolve under the paint coming alive, and you would only feel a phantom skip of the heart, absorbed so in the colors. Your disbelief is a later novel emerging in the long, long shadow of an earlier one. Is this the great world, which is whatever is the case? The sustained helplessness you feel in the long emptiness of days is matched by the new suspiciousness and wrath you wake to each morning. Isn't this a relationship with your death too, to fall in love with your inscrutable life? Your teeth fill with cavities. There is always unearned happiness for some, and the criminal feeling of solitude. Always, everyone lies about his life. Fall. Each night, the same dream. I'm an odd Victorian mansion in a field of wheat, and I'm either waiting for the field to catch fire or the hearse of love to pull up to the manse. Don't wake me. In daylight, my mother talks of brideliness as a measure of time, in a kind of flower, a narrative of ascension. I intimate some sort of border is being discussed, but I can't concentrate for the sake of all the beautiful things claiming my attentions in the tawny fields. There, a blankness without meanness, such as one finds in a naked sea with all its fundamental majesty. This is called The Dark World. Pierre looks out the prison window and laughs because the world is inside him. I'm terrified because I love the world, but which one? It snows all afternoon, but in the west, the canyons are cooling in the shifting natural light. Each world curls at its edges, and yet I am ever biddable in either direction. Here is the interior holding up its torn roots in front of your eyes, seigneurial and glittering. I taste it slowly, the afternoon being as wide as the death. I hear the wind and the snow in the wind. I'm half open and half shut, dragging the chains of the day through the fat blood of a life, listening to the mathematics of one season drifting over to another. I want bars again, restaurants that stay open late, gossip in the kitchen, the bright tessellations of painful wishing, movies, plumes of envy, flower stalls. Let me stay awake as whole worlds keep arriving with their raggedness, with their synoptic force. I'm going to read a few new poems. This is from a new forthcoming book, which is called The Curious Thing. The first poem is called The Protagonists. At one time, I asked for everything. When I saw how my love was squandered, I would secrete venom. But now I sing of the fat, sleepy little censor who has replaced me, whose disappointments create the life of the house. What does the human heart love? To go, to have so far to go in deepest night. The challenge now is to convey the supreme gaiety of the heart. It is a stone flung from a volcano. Chicago. I had a little stove and a wick of wakefulness in my sleep. In the mornings, I heard the train roar and go up into the center of things. I circulated thoughts like, I will always be restless for crowds and lights and noise. I would take long walks and say to no one, when I was first married. I saw all of Louis Buñuel's films inside of a week. The darkness was delicious. I could always almost smell it. I wasn't young, I wasn't old. I was still nibbling at what lay before me. And later, when I didn't have the energy to wait out the days made unalike only by the fact of the seasons, I planned a few things too. Black box. We were in a small, grim cafe. She sipped pure black droplets from a tiny cup. Make him come back, she said, her voice like something brought up intact from the cold center of a lake. It was the kind of story I like, and I wanted to get it right for later. The hot morning in the cafe, feeling encroached on by a cloud of dusty ferns and creepers, and the low earth of duty. I can't read a book all the way through, she said, and most days I'm only unhappy. My heart is always with the lovers. This last poem is called San Francisco. My older neighbor on Rose Street once showed me the contents of his rent-controlled apartment, just up the stairs from mine. He was a hoarder, living in a state of tragic grandeur that his circumstances did not entirely support. Recurringly, his latest boyfriend would flee from him. When we met later in the alley to take out the trash, we would reliably turn into two lumps of fear. What was more terrifying than being abandoned? Downstairs, I was a collector too, with my need to interpret and sort everything. But we didn't tire of the spectacle of our private lives, though many initiatives went badly wrong. I was altogether more anxious about being light-minded. My railroad apartment was a small cloth diary with a lock and key. It was my real life, or what so often passes among us for real life. And for all his possessions, my neighbor dreamed of having a Petit Trianon with a vast garden to walk in and dog roses lavishing a limitless dining room table. Of course, there was no table because there was no dining room. Obviously, there was never a garden to walk in. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lloyd Wallace. I'm Poetry Daily's main intern, I guess. I read a lot of emails. I read a lot of books. It's about all I do. I'm introducing Vivek Narayanan. So, Vivek Narayanan was born in India and raised in Zambia. His poems, while often concerned with historical materials and the way that the past embosses itself on the present, are not themselves anachronistic. Like every great poet writing today, his poems are not sketches of an inner mind, but are the actual waterlogged mind itself displayed in a poem's glass container. They are subversive, witty, beautiful, and immensely fun to read. His books include Universal Beat, He teaches at my favorite college, George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Vivek, everybody, thank you.
Thank you for that, Lloyd. And thank you, Sandra, for those poems. And thanks to Susie and Kara for fantastic Fall for the Book lineup. And to Julia. And thanks to Poetry Daily and Peter and Sally for inviting me in. I'm very happy to be a tiny part of this amazing device, this contraption called Poetry Daily. I'll start by reading something from my forthcoming book called After, which is a writing through the Sanskrit of Valmiki's Ramayana. But the poem I'll read draws on a single half line in the midst of this vast South Asian epic, Kirmi Raga Peristume, the color of Kirmi soaking into the ground where a great warrior has died. So Kirmi refers to an intensely red, a blood red insect, sometimes called a cochineal, which was crushed in the ancient world to produce a dye, a color. And when it became clear to me that the Sanskrit word kirmi was also the Arabic kirmitz and the English crimson, I felt a kind of intense electricity passing through these words. But I also, for some reason, couldn't help thinking of crimson salesmen traversing the ancient world to sell their wares. To crimson. Is there not yet a word for blood? Must your crushed skeleton preserve it? How far did you come to market to me the vivid of that rouge? What will made you and made a husked crawler of you, nibbling through the lexicons, kirmi to kirmitz to crimson, crimson, kirmitz to kirmi? What hands arrived you under embroidered lock, not as colony, but shade, that all the mortal eyes could be blessed under the glancing blade? You are soaked soil, oil to light the fingers, the cloak that kings ought to wear, as also the song of secret import, sold at best price, to the rare, curled fear that finds it, that wants it most. Now bring me my canvas, bring me your stanza, the sun's light strikes. You are the warrior's last as it leaves him, but never from the urge to forget. Always for the little flags curling up the stem. Now, if in that book I worked with a kind of source or inspiration text, but always found myself trying to remake it, reinvent it, approach it slant in some way. Funnily enough, in a current project I found myself working on and working with, this time an ancient Tamil anthology called the Kuruntokai, consisting solely of very short poems between 4 to 8 lines in length. Funnily enough, with the Kuruntokai, I've actually found myself doing something much more like a traditional translation, following the contours of the poem closely and keeping the integrity of the line, and trying to keep the disjunctions and junctions in these ancient poems that I think maybe previous translations have smoothed over. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to offer these here is because of one particular strand or theme in this anthology, and that is poems of isolation, or rather poems from isolation. And in that sense, these poems that are, roughly a couple thousand years old began to feel uncannily resonant with, or right for our own current moment, where we all seem to be calling out to each other from our isolation. So this is Kuruntoke 27. Lost to the calf and missing from the pot is the milk of a good cow fallen to the floor of a shed. Like that, I'm worthless to myself and held away from a lover. And the pallor must eat away at my dark-hued beauty, the birthmark on my thigh. And this is my last poem, which really does go out to all of you, all of us. Kuruntokai 11. Cut from conch's smooth and shiny bangles, loosen every day on the wrist. Unsleeping, eyes wet with aloneness. Stuck here, will escape to over there. First, rise up and live, my heart, before the hemp chaplets of the Vadagars, beyond Katti, honorable land of many spears, further into the country of unknown languages, thinking how to reach the place where he is. Thank you.
My name is Danielle Williams, and I am an editorial coordinator for Poetry Daily. I help with the daily newsletter and social media accounts, and am a third-year poet in the MFA program at George Mason University. Our next editorial board member reading tonight is Carmen Jimenez Smith. Born in New York, she is the daughter of South American immigrants. A Cantamundo Fellow, she earned a BA in English from San Jose State University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop. She writes lyric essays as well as poetry, and is the author of 6 collections of poetry, including Cruel Futures, Milk and Filth, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Goodbye, Flicker, winner of the Juniper Prize for Poetry. She is the author of the memoir, Bring Down the Little Birds, on mothering, art, work, and everything, which received an American Book Award. She also co-edited Angels of the Americlips, New Latina Writing. Jimenez Smith's work explores issues affecting the lives of females, including Latina identity, and frequently references myth and memory. Wolf Schneider, writing in New Mexico Magazine, described Jimenez Smith's poetry as waves of free verse, incantation, and song. Everyone welcome Carmen Jimenez Smith.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be reading with these fine poets tonight. And I haven't read in a long minute, so I'm going to read some poems I don't normally read, what I guess I'd call my B-sides. So I'll go ahead and start with a poem called Boy Crazy. The echoes of sirens and cicadas and the drunk boys who howl into the trees at 2 a.m. infect my window while I sleep. And I'm pulled into a girl I once was, calling for love into a sky transected by power lines until sunrise when the town tightened into itself. I prayed for a boy's wolf life, the dream of skulking along streets with hunger and immunity. I wanted to cup the moon's curve in my hand like it belonged to me. That was how young I was. Okay, this is a poem about mental illness. And obviously I'm thinking about Sylvia Plath here, but I'm also just trying to think of a new way of imagining bipolar disorder or conditions. Self as deep as coma. When I was a girl, I thought clouds were God and that we dialogued about sin, which mirrored my desires. When our talks made me paranoid, I counted the letters in each word I heard, turned them backward or rearranged them alphabetically to dodge the buzz of my head. Other times, I was the sadder side of the coin and the air around me felt like jewels, then abyss, pulling the hair from my head and a type of catatonia. My family thought I should lift myself with mind, lift myself from the bed, from the couch, as if the body were the mind's queen. We've seen the world, my family would tell me. In the world, suffering is hunger, war, disease, they said. And because those calamities were terrible, I was ashamed for the insignificance of mine. What I had made, they said, and I should cast it off like a snake molting skin. So I would try each of my atoms a ton, which led to a thought experiment at 11, death by pills. I survived, woozy, but alive. No scar left, no redemption or courage, just shame so dark my ancestors called from the fathoms to ask why I sought out their shadows. To end a conversation, tell a story of suicide with a girl in it. She's a ghost desperate for absolution. When I was a girl, I wilted or blew. I burrowed into pain. When I was a girl, I thought my storm would suck me into its eye and uncoil me from what I was. When I was a girl, I worried about who knew I knew. I worried who I could hurt, so I hid myself. We are storms and bargains with heaven, pulses of electricity moving within infinite networks, so much fallibility. What do we bear? Oh, I don't know what just happened with my computer. What do we bear? When I was a girl, I worried about who knew I know. I worried who I could hurt, so I hid myself. We are storms and bargains with heaven, pulses of electricity moving within infinite networks. So much fallibility. What do we bear that comes from inside of us? We bear everything, each part. I loved the part when the world was my torrid lover, seduced by the blue blaze beaming from my body. My eye helped me plow through the living room like a comet. I could burn down or out or air, and I could be such a good poet in it sometimes. I liked how brilliant the light words emitted stars I arranged in a sky, like a god who would fall to the earth, having made something beautiful and vainglorious. Sometimes these were the days, the ones I could hold still long enough to arrange stars without the burn. But I cannot. I have in me a buried spark. I buried it myself. When I was a girl, I collected reams of paper soothed by the white over and over the hope of starting from blank. I hoped to endure being well enough to conjure a new bright vessel because I wanted to live. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. The poem didn't want me to read it in that moment. I'm going to read a poem about apologizing, which I think is something we probably all do too much, but I think women do it especially a lot. And this poem is called No Apology, a Poemifesto, and it begins with an epigraph by Susan Brianti, which actually originated as a text to me by Susan Brianti. Isn't there a line by Yusuf Komunyakaa? I apologize for the eyes in my head. Maybe what I am trying to say is that I apologize for the sight in my eyes. Susan Brianti. I would love to make a proposal, and it is out of love, not patronizing love, but true revolutionary love, and it won't upset the orbit tomorrow. So here's where I'd like to begin, and this might be the hardest thing you've tried to do, or maybe you already do it, and I'm very grateful to you because you've inspired me. I know it's the hardest thing for me because I haven't done it consistently, not at all sorry. But I want to recommend that we stop apologizing. Today I counted and I said, I'm sorry, approximately 22 times. I apologized for my setting my stuff down on the counter at Kroger. I apologized for being behind someone at a copy machine. I apologized for someone else bumping into a stranger. I apologized for taking longer than a minute to explain an idea. Suffice it to say, I am sorry all the time. I won't tell you. Oh my God, sorry. Sorry about that. I won't tell you what to do because that makes me an implicit solicitor of sorry. Personally, when the word comes into my mouth, I'm going to shape it into a seed to plant another woman's aura as love. I only ask that we get started. This is our first step toward world domination. Gosh, I apologize. This is such a Keystone Cops kind of poetry reading. I'm getting used to reading online in all of the ways that one does. I'm going to read a poem from the end called I Will Be My Mother's Apprentice. I will be my mother's apprentice as if I were a hunger, because it is our bleak and common future to reverse the Sphinx. I study the meander of her logic for context. Sometimes it is like a poem that is not quite realized, filled with hollows and bursts, a stranger's grief and rage. She asks for home when she's home. She screams for the purse we haven't hidden from her. Sometimes we circle the same spots, and I try to be as I know she was with me once, remedy and anchor. I'm a fair to poor replica, yet still her proxy. That you don't know her is your misfortune, a hot planet's core, late summer's best light. As metaphor, I evoke a pink, vulnerable jelly, translucent and containing the past. I hold it in my hand and against a lamp. This is our intimacy now. My nails trace the brown spots that mark her losses. Beautiful and sad and strange, I say, because I've made her into something else. Thank you.
Leslie Smith speaking here. I work on permissions and on the daily newsletter for Poetry Daily. I taught at George Mason University for just over 20 years, and I'm also an alumna of the MFA program in creative writing, which is where Peter Streckfuss and I first met. Louis Gluck selected Peter's first book, The Cuckoo, for the Yale series of younger poets in 2003, while his second book, Airings, won the Fordham University Press's POL Editors Prize in 2013. I've always been deeply moved by the intellectual trajectories of Peter's poems and captured again and again by their emotional heft. the possibilities for being within one of Peter's poems seem infinite, but yet specific. A sensation, I think, captured extremely well by Lisa Raspar in a review essay in 2014, when she wrote, Peter Streckfus reveals an opening up to and a heeding of the invisible poem behind all wording. I can't think of a better phrase, a better sentence with which to introduce my colleague and I hope friend, Peter Streckfus.
Thank you, Leslie. It's exciting and humbling to be reading with Carmen and Sandra and Vivek. I'm going to read a poem that recently appeared under the title Little Songs in the Adroit Journal. Holy Fire, Cleveland National Forest, California, 2018. The Pacific wears its thin veil of smoke. You, child, in its simulacrum, a saltwater pool by the townhouses. Summer afternoon repeated. In English, the most beautiful words. I see you through your eyes, their piercing catch of mind as you master the intake of breath above its reflection. Water in the body of your little boat. Nearly 5 years on the earth, the pool too deep for you to touch. For days later, I record it, like Wharton's repetition of James's, transcribed and altered against the impossibility. Impenetrable time, I record this here. Meanwhile, the Ferguson fire and the car and the Mendocino complex fire, the largest on record in California, 459,000 acres raged in the north. Meanwhile, the Holy Fire, named after Holy Jim Canyon, where it began when a man named Forrest gave it to his neighbors, flamed over the saddled crest of Saddleback on its way through its first 18,000 acres, visible from our pool 12 miles away. And the air above Lake Elsinore rose each summer afternoon and drew wind from the Pacific. So the fire respired down canyon in sun, then up at night. The fire's down-up canyon movement each day named for the lake, the Elsinore effect. The lake itself named for Hamlet's house on fire, for everything may serve a lower as well as a higher use. The surface limbs and breaks across your goggles in summer afternoon. You break your stroke and raise your resolutely sealed lips above it. Your lungs a sound that brings the bodies of disaster into view and all their clear abstraction. You come to me. You steal your breaths in memory like a word. It pushes through the air. It comes to the ear. It cries out, cut from its mother. I am born. At the Embarcadero, we'd ridden the Ferris wheel. We'd had ice cream. We did not shop. We didn't have time. We played in the sand yard on the shore, a Gulliver-sized statue of a foot, a head, a knee, a hand coming out of the sand. We did not ride the merry-go-round. We did not have time. We were leaving, walking back to the lot, and your sister turned to run for a fountain. She followed you, who just bolted for the fountain, and I grabbed her by the arm to keep her near, to keep her from being at the fountain. I held her arm by the hand. I turned quickly to catch her, a kind of arrest. I kept her while you ran until I caught you. To catch. What is it I want to say? I am not gentle. It was quick, as her bolt was quick. It was fierce, as if to say, no, never. As if to say, I catch you, have you in hand. To defeat her flight. Is this what a father does? As if to say, do not try to escape again, not when you're within my reach. As if from the sky, as if from my half sleep, do not wake me in my confusion. You, keen on the souvenir in the market, with your song and your cloud architects rising from the tables, pouring their structures in concrete. I spoke to your mother tonight after we put you and your sister to sleep. She said she hoped I could be happy soon. She wished me to be gentle with you. When you cry, hurt, or enraged, the philtrum, the medial cleft of your upper lip, stretches, transformed. I feel my esophagus like a scabbard tighten. How to remove the story without depending on force. How to reach you, standing at the door, wanting nothing from me in the room than the half-thought substance of my own attention. To be noticed. See me, Daddy. Daddy, look closely. I have a magic trick to show you. Anger comes so easily out of me, my author, my father, since you died. By the time you were old, you seemed empty of it. You were a punisher, punitive strikes with the belt. I don't want to tell my son this. I don't know how often the welts on my legs were there. Were they normal to me? But I know they were not a surprise, seen as a sign that you had whipped me too hard. An apology. My mind fills and runs, nervous as I try to enter this room with you. As you strayed from details of the punishments you suffered under your father. Daddy, watch this coin. Where did it exit the world? A school of koi and the shallow beneath a pier turn over one another, churning. One, many, have a kind of pink wound on the back, circular, as if a sticker from a banana, as if a coin of their flesh had been removed. You were a punisher. You would abide little dissent. Now I am the punisher. Time as the divisor. Without us, in its own undulating place and time, the blaze rises in the sky. Its heat creates its own wind, feeding it more oxygen, violence proceeding from it as if on command, as if automated. Round the world, a chain of supervision. The hurt, and pain of that. From the ridge, I watch its tint, refracted through smoke in the distance, a robin's blood orange, a koi's, a dark safety cone. A train cuts through the valley, the hills terraced with those who can and cannot. In the vale, as if to meet the day's first aerial tanker drop a sheet of retardant. It raises its volcanic head, the holy fire. Time as the divisor, your sister folds like a knife in her inflatable donut and teleports, bottom first, into the pool's deep end. You pull through the water, your slender hero's body, raise your head, gasp, and thrash your nonce breaststroke further toward me. Thank you, everybody, for coming.